Okay, hello again, everybody. So I'm back here today, thankfully, with Sydney, Sydney Volpe, and so we're going to talk about some films from Paul Thomas Anderson. I know we both like Paul Thomas Anderson, and so he doesn't have like a super extensive filmography. It's not like we're doing all of Martin Scorsese films or something. So yeah, we just want to talk about a couple of his films and just talk about him as a filmmaker and as an artist, and just like have an interesting discussion. So you just want to talk about, I guess, what your experience with Paul Thomas Anderson has been like when you first saw some of his films, like what your impression was, what really strikes you about him as a filmmaker.
Yeah, he's easily my favorite director of all time. I have a review of Licorice Pizza up on my channel right now if anyone wants to check that out. But my first experience with Paul Thomas Anderson was There Will Be Blood, which I feel like a lot of people, that's like, since it's such a popular film and pretty much widely agreed that it's one of the best films of all time. That was my first experience with him, and I just fell totally in love with it. Like, I was so blown away by how interesting of a character study it was, and of course Daniel Day-Lewis. And so then I kind of started to learn about him and watch some of his other films, Magnolia, Boogie Nights, and I'm just so in awe of just, I don't know, I feel like there's no other director who you can feel how in love they are with like human beings and just like how imperfect we are, and he just the detail in his films and how real his characters feel. Those are probably the biggest reasons why I love him as a filmmaker.
Yeah, totally. I think he does a great job of capturing, like, it's usually like a person in a time and place.
Yeah.
And then by kind of attacking both of those things at the same time, he's able to kind of give a commentary about society in a way.
Yeah.
Like There Will Be Blood is a great example. It's like, let's take this guy who's like the embodiment of, like, I guess the capitalist ideal, like a person who came from nothing, worked extremely hard, was extremely competitive, and became rich. And this time period, like the late 20, like around like 1890 is when it was when a lot of the story takes place, like 1898, and it's like what happens, and it's just a lot of his films are kind of like that. So yeah, I mean it's really interesting, especially the characters, right? There's always like a couple, either like the main lead character or just like side characters that are really leave an impression in his films.
Yeah, very true. That's a really good point about like these people in a place and time. I feel like his societal commentary is very, very discreet, but it's definitely there in most of his films. I mean, a lot of his films take place in the 70s. I saw a really interesting post talking about kind of capitalism and manhood in the 70s with Licorice Pizza, and how all these people around Gary are, these greedy, either like businessmen or they're famous men, and how it's only a matter of time before he kind of becomes that. And that's kind of how his manhood is defined, which I thought was really interesting. I hadn't really picked up on that, but you can definitely go back to all his films and there's something that he's saying about society there for all of them.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. And how their environment, whether it be like the people or just the physical place, can affect how people behave.
Right.
Because a lot of these films, they spend a lot of time on the character in some kind of ways. Like there is a plot in a way, but a lot of it is just like, let's see how this person evolves over time in the place that they're at. And so it's a lot of these are character studies in a lot of ways.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, so I guess just to talk real quick, we can talk. So the first film he ever did was Hard Eight. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to see it. I did watch some of it a couple days ago. Very interesting first film. It's very well written. Basically, it's about some sort of like a professional gambler who meets a drifter, and the two of them kind of make friends. And then the drifter, he becomes a good gambler, just like his mentor. Falls in love with this girl. They make some mistakes, but there's a path between the professional gambler and the grifter character that doesn't get revealed until later. And so that's kind of like the conflict of the story. And it takes place in Las Vegas, a very seedy, a very super seedy place. Yeah, and that film had a great cast. I think Gwyneth Paltrow was in it. John C. Reilly, one of the mainstays, is in it. Philip Seymour Hoffman is in it as well.
Yep.
So yeah, the film really kind of, I think, marked a lot of what we're going to see him do in later films.
That's very true. I definitely feel like it felt like, yeah, it felt like not fully blossomed PTA, but definitely he's always had this tendency to just explore characters. And again, movies that aren't very plot driven. We're kind of just watching these really, really interesting and complex people. And then there's always, like this little twist, like how you said, like his connection to John C. Reilly's father. Are we talking spoilers?
Yeah, we can talk full spoilers on all this. Spoil everything.
Yeah, and then kind of having all his motivations explained, and how that relationship was a lot more complicated than we thought. And also in that you can see from the very beginning of his filmography that I won't say all of his films, but he so often puts in this kind of paternal, like these paternal relationships, and the kind of like surrogate mothers and fathers or whatever, which I think is a really interesting, consistent theme in his movies.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a powerful theme, like especially the sometimes it's like abandonment or like lack of parental figures and what that does to people.
Right.
In a lot of ways. Yeah, I mean, what comes to my mind is like Steven Spielberg. I mean, his dad will never hear the end of it, basically.
Yeah.
He did that for like 30 years. There's some person who's been abandoned, but that stuff leaves a really strong mark on people.
Yeah,
sure.
For
and
sure.
It's like, I mean, that's like one of the purest types of sort of storytelling tropes that you can do. A person who doesn't have some figure in their life and they're looking for it. Some parental figure, some mentor, something, and they're looking for it.
Right.
Yeah, and for sure, like there's a lot of that in his films too. Like you're saying.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if you want to get to specific films, and I'll wait to talk about, because I think especially in Boogie Nights, that's a pretty big thing. And even in The Master, what makes that relationship so complicated is that there's like, there's a lot of Freudian stuff going on with these relationships too, with the homoeroticism there. And then in Boogie Nights, Dirk Diggler's relationship with Julianne Moore's character, who I forget her name.
Forget her.
And like Phantom Thread, how she's kind of coming in his mother's place. It's everywhere. He's like, he's putting his weird psychology all out.
Yeah, I mean, There Will Be Blood. Like there's like the beginning of the film is basically he finds the mine, he's digging the mine, and there's almost like a moment where it's like a 50-50 between him or the other guy could have died. And so he just kind of doesn't die by luck. And he just adopts this child and decides, well, I'm going to adopt this child, but use them for profit.
Yeah. Right. And so the other guy was the child's father, right? Okay.
Yes.
There Will Be Blood I haven't seen in maybe like a year. So, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. And even, again, Licorice Pizza, right?
Yeah.
His, what's his name's parental figures are just like, where are they?
Yeah, I mean, his dad. I know he doesn't even address where his dad is, but shows very clearly that he's had to step into that role of being the man in the house for his brothers, and his mom works for him, and then Alana like also kind of feels like they have feelings for each other, but also they have this platonic kind of sibling relationship going on, and she acts a little bit as like a mom figure to him, depending on what's going on.
Yeah, she kind of like oscillates between, because they have this very, it's like, oh, I don't like you, but you don't like me, so I don't like you, so you don't like me, so I don't like you. So they're like in a relationship, then out of a relationship, and then he's flirting with someone, and then she gets mad, so then she's flirting with someone, and so then while one of them is not with the other, they're trying to date other people.
Yeah,
and then that gets the other person jealous,
Yeah,
but then they always come back together because the other relationships just don't work.
Yeah, exactly. It's very push and pull, and yeah, like that tension. All the tension in the film comes from the fact that they can't be together, right? And yeah, and there were times where it's like he didn't seem like he was as into it, and then she was super jealous, and vice versa. And then they come together in these moments, all the running moments in that
Yeah,
movie.
yeah, yeah.
I love.
The one that I really think about is like when they're at that bar, and she's there with was he like a director or something, or an actor, or both, something like that.
I forget his
name.
He's
some crazy Hollywood guy.
Sean
By
Penn.
the way, I love that Sean Penn performance because I feel like it's super underrated, but he is like, that character is so crazy. That guy is legitimately insane. But he plays it so kind of straight in a way that you almost kind of don't get it. Like there's this great line when he's talking to her, like, yeah, so like, I was out in the jungles of Africa and I saw 3 of my friends get executed. And she's like, is this a line from a movie? And it is, by the way. It is, by the way, because then the other guy is like, oh yeah, he just did a movie about the Sons of Africa or something about, some movie where people were in the Congo. And that's what he was talking about. But he's using that as a pickup line with this 25-year-old girl. He's crazy.
Yeah, he's clearly insane. And with that, it also brought in what I thought was so interesting about Alana's character, that in a way she was trying to make Gary jealous, but she's also, because Alana is so lost, like she's also seeking male validation, like wherever she can find it, but never finds what she wants. And she tries to convince herself that she's making a genuine connection, and then realizes, oh, this guy doesn't give a shit about me, just like everyone else. And then being straight with it when he says something, and she's like, I don't know what that means, but I'm hot, right?
Yeah. Because so she's going like from she's going like from one world where, so it's like she tries to date the 15-year-old, and that doesn't work. Then she's with this 50-year-old or whatever, that doesn't work, and she's like, where do I go? What do I do?
Yeah.
What's right for me?
Exactly. She doesn't really know what she's doing, and I think that's why she loves these little business ventures with Gary, because she feels like she has a purpose, and she's doing it with him and loves spending time with him. But then outside of that, she's doing politics and whatever. Like she doesn't really know what she wants to do.
Yeah, and that's another tragic sort of path that she goes down. She's like, she believes in this, the Benny Safdie character, and she kind of likes him. And then it turns out he's gay. And on top of that, they're going to use her to not get him in trouble because it's the 70s. You can't be openly gay.
Yeah.
And so that's just another, like, where she's like pursuing things with her heart, and then it leads to her being hurt,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's so interesting. I thought she was such an interesting character. I hear people saying that, she didn't end up being very sympathetic in the end. But I disagree. Even as like a young woman, like I'm 22, I'm in that demographic. I felt like she was a really, really excellent depiction of, just a very imperfect young woman. She's childish. She doesn't know what she wants to do. But there was something about her that I just thought was really powerful, in the way that she was really trying, to figure it all out. And that's what the movie was about too, is just navigating adulthood.
Yeah, I also really love that whole thing with the other boy that she started dating, the other actor. And so, yeah, remember she meets that.
Skylar Gazondo's character.
Yeah, that guy. That was, because like that was so funny, because like, they're having like this halal dinner, and he's like, oh, can you bless the bread? He's like, I'm sorry, I'm an atheist.
It's like,
and they're looking at him like, what? You're Jewish, right? It's like, yeah, but I don't believe.
The fact that it was the entire Chaim family just makes it that much funnier. And then what did she say when they go outside, and she's like, are you circumcised?
Yeah. She said, and you're... That was so funny. Yeah, oh my God, that's so funny. But like, she's just, every avenue she goes down, it's tragic, right? Like, yeah. That's gotta be just frustrating. Because, again, Gary would then go back to her, right? Like she would kind of fall out of these things. Like she literally falls off of that bike.
Yeah,
With the
literally.
Sean Penn.
And that's a moment when they kind of, I know it's like they're in love with each other kind of at different times, and then these running scenes kind of represent when it's you know, flowing at the same time. And it is interesting that it's like it took her like being with another guy and then just like having a complete fool made out of herself for them to be like, oh, we love each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other scene I really loved too was like, so what was it that they did? I forget exactly what. Okay, it was the waterbeds.
Okay.
So he had that waterbed company, and they had this big thing, and they're all smoking weed, and there's all these people making out. And Gary goes to make out with some other girl. She looks at him, and she's like depressed, and she kind of walks home. But she's wearing like basically like a bikini or something. And then her dad, she walks in the door, and her dad's like, "What the fuck?" His delivery was so perfect. Funny.
Her top is like stuffed with a bunch of like paper towels and shit.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so. And then yeah, she just like storms out, makes out with some random guy, and then goes home.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. It's so funny. But yeah, it just underscores like how frustrated she is. She just can't get every avenue she goes. Like we see like 4 different relationships that just don't work.
Right.
So, you know, and she always ends up, but they always end up coming back to each other. And, you know, at the end, they have a very nice moment and they run off together.
Yeah. I know. What do you think of the end there?
Well, I mean, I liked it. I mean, I haven't gotten into this discourse.
Yeah.
Like the meta discourse. So this is it's kind of off the wall, but like, so I think the analogy that's kind of relevant and recent is the Sylvie Loki stuff. So, okay, so is that incest? I don't want to think about it. I'll just put it that way. Like that's the thing. So is it kind of wrong that he's 15 and she's 25? Probably, but it's just a movie, and it's not like we see them have sex or something. It's just like a cute little kiss, and then they're off and they're happy.
Yeah.
So for me, that's as far as it goes. I don't think the film's like toxic or anything. I've heard people use that term for this movie that it's like they have a toxic relationship and it's like putting forward toxic relationships. I don't agree with that. But I thought it was a beautiful moment, and especially when it's like the sunset and they shot it and it's so beautiful. It's just wonderful.
Yeah.
It makes me feel positive inside.
I know. I feel like we're definitely in a stage of discourse and kind of like social issues where there's a lot of like, I don't want to call it virtue signaling because like at its core, the intentions are good, but it's so much more complicated than saying like, oh, she's grooming him and like some of these like really extreme things that I've heard. But I mean, the point is that it's wrong, right? And just because it's wrong doesn't mean that it shouldn't be explored through film and through art. And it makes it even more, you know, interesting that Paul Thomas Anderson is kind of painting it as this fantasy that he had when he was younger, with like an older teacher that he had a crush on, and kind of exploring like what would a relationship like this look like and kind of the beauty of it and also the discomfort of it and why it's wrong. And yeah, I just think it was something really interesting to explore. And another thing I heard was people saying that he kind of like glorifies it, but it's, you know, it's up to us to interpret why he framed it in that way. And depiction doesn't mean he's condoning what's on the screen. So I think it was a dynamic really worth exploring, and they're just both such interesting characters in their own right.
Yeah, they're both confused, but in the end, we have no idea. They could walk off on the sunset, and then the next day, Gary does something else, and they hate each other.
Yeah, you know. So, and you're right. Like, it's not like they're like having sex, which. First of all, I mean, you saw Red Rocket. I didn't. I don't know how bad it gets, but I've heard it's pretty bad. But I feel like because
Red Rocket's a lot crazier. It's worse.
I feel like because it's
yeah.
painting it as something disgustingly wrong, or unless it's not, I haven't seen it, but I feel like, it's very clear that it's like, oh, this is super messed up that he's doing that. I feel like that's the difference that comes in here.
Yeah. People, they want that condemnation. They want the author to create a strong, like, oh, she's evil.
Yeah. Yeah. like he's a bad guy. And so, most of what he does is scummy or whatever. But yeah, I hear everyone on it, but I think that this is just what Paul Thomas Anderson does, and I think they were both really beautifully written characters and really interesting. If it can happen in real life, I think film can explore it. That's a dangerous statement, but for the most part, that's what I believe.
Yeah, no, I don't think. I think that there's definitely films that tackle these type of subjects in a way that is more glorifying,
for sure,
like making it, like it's okay. And I don't know. The other thing too is like the Gary character, like he initiates this whole thing, and that's what a lot of young boys do, to be honest. Like they like they do this kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's like that bad, but I this is just another one of the parts of being an artist right now. You got to take the slings and arrows because they're going to come for you all the time from every angle. Even the people you think are your allies are going to come after you. And that's what it's about. Like being an artist, you have to have kind of the confidence and faith that you can just put your thing out there and just see what the world thinks of it.
Yeah. Pushing boundaries.
Yeah. Because, there's nothing that everyone's going to like.
That's true.
No movie. No movie. The Shawshank Redemption, there are people that hate it. The Godfather, there are people that hate it. Everything. It just depends on people's opinions.
Yeah.
So so why don't we talk about now his second film,
okay,
Boogie Nights.
Boogie Nights.
Yeah. So, this film's really cool. I think this is the first film of his I saw. I feel like there was a time in like the early 2000s or the 90s where I would just like flip channels on HBO when there was like 10 HBO channels, and some movie would be on, like, oh, this is interesting, and I just watch it. And I feel like that's how I first watched Boogie Nights.
Wow.
Yeah. But it does a great job of really sucking you into the narrative. Like it's really powerful.
Yeah,
a lot of fun.
Today I was rewatching it and I was like, okay, like I can like be getting some other stuff done while I rewatch it. I just want to make sure all the plot points are fresh in my head. And I ended up like standing up in front of my laptop watching it because it really was that engaging and yeah, interesting introduction to PTA for sure.
Oh yeah,
the first of his, but another really, really great one from him.
Yeah, this to me kind of, when I think about him, like what's so emblematic of this is that there's a kind of collage of characters and moments and places.
Yeah.
Usually you get a lot of like small characters that are very interesting. I mean, there's some great, like the Alfred Molina character in this movie, the drug dealer guy.
You're right.
That scene is crazy. That scene is absolutely like so powerful, so effective, so like on the edge of your seat the whole time. You're like, ooh, this is gonna go really bad.
Yeah.
This is gonna go really bad. But it just hooks you in. And there's a whole bunch of stuff like that in this movie. And also, again, it's like the late 70s. It's another time period thing. It's this person who, so crazy. He's like the right person at the right place at the right time, and he ends up in porn, which is crazy. And yeah, like you said, they become his adopted fit. Because like one of the things I didn't totally remember was like the stuff with his family is really bad in this movie. The Marky Mark character, Dirk Diggler, his family, like his dad just like kind of sits there while his mom just goes off on him. And they basically throw him out.
Yeah.
And what does he have left to do? He finds his guy, who becomes sort of his adoptive parent, and then his wife who does porn kind of becomes his mom.
Yeah, I know. Like that's what I was talking about, the Freudian thing. Like so many layers to that. And she's also messed up in X amount of ways, but yeah, I feel like in the way that you said that kind of him finding his adoptive family after his family threw him out, and I feel like his family kind of thought he was stupid and, he was never going to amount to anything. And so I feel like the underlying theme here also is kind of like dreams and kind of chasing your dreams and just going big with what you want to do, especially with Don Cheadle's character, and then Roller Girl going and getting her GED. That was really interesting. But then also Dirk Diggler's kind of rise and fall in the porn industry is interesting as well. And it is, you're right, like this collage of really complex characters and character dynamics. You got John C. Reilly and Philip Seymour Hoffman's characters. Just a lot. It's just this image of the porn industry in the 70s and all the interesting people that populated it at that time.
Yeah. I mean, Philip Seymour Hoffman is so amazing in this movie.
He's amazing in every movie.
Yeah. He's like, because like his character, he just does so many small things that are just like, it tells you everything without him having to really say anything. Actually, like one of the things I remember is like there's this great, like when his character first sees Dirk Diggler, like he does this iris right on him, and it's like, oh, he's like obsessed with this guy immediately.
Yeah, I know. It's like that little moment, and you can just tell. And then it's like every single interaction they have, you know exactly what's going on. It's just about it playing out after that.
Yeah, and he's so awkward with him, but he's like trying to be a really good friend. Like he actually really kind of, like I remember there's a scene where they're talking about, selling the fake drugs and holding up the Alfred Molina drug dealer character, and he's there. He's like, hey, I don't think that's a good idea. And none of them listen to him. He's like, yo, you need to like mind your own business, to shut up. And they get into this crazy situation, just because they're stupid and addicted to drugs.
Right. Yeah, I feel like that's also something that, I mean, even though this one also, for the most part, is not very plot driven, there are these events that happen in all Paul Thomas Anderson's film. Like I would liken that to like Bradley Cooper's segment in Licorice Pizza. Like it's kind of like, what's a crazy thing that could happen to these people that makes sense based on like their characteristics and what they've been doing. Like what would their actions genuinely lead to? But also in a very entertaining way.
Yeah, it needs to be some hijinks. The hijinks in this is like, oh, let's have a drug dealer who's totally crazy, and there's just some random guy lighting firecrackers. So everyone's on edge. Two people are armed, and two people want out. One guy is going to try and do this holdup, but he's kind of sketched out of his mind. And hey, you have a recipe for disaster.
Right, and then the red car.
Yeah, the red car. Yeah, that stuff it's really cool. Trying to think if there's any other like really kind of things that stand out in Boogie Nights.
Yeah,
it feels very 90s to me. It feels very 90s, like from the opening shot, that like long take. It reminds me a lot of like, it feels a lot like kind of, I guess the things that come to my mind was like what Scorsese was doing in the 90s, the Pulp Fiction, like the Quentin Tarantino films. A lot of that kind of stuff is like very high level bravado, like strong camera movements. Like his camera work is exquisite in this film in a lot of ways.
I had a note of that too. And what year did this come out? Do you have that on hand?
Yeah, it's 97.
97. Okay, there you go. Yeah, I did take a note of his transitions and his editing, and his camera movements were very fitting for the era he was trying to depict. But very, very strong, very forthcoming. But they all flowed very well.
Yeah, I really liked the editing of this film, because I felt like it really gave it this sort of strong momentum carrying it, because it's like 2.5 hours, but it does not feel like 2.5 hours.
Oh, for sure not.
Yeah.
And it was definitely kind of like themed editing and transitions. And I also just love it, like he does a lot of really interesting establishing shots. The one that I like a lot in this film is when we first see Dirk Diggler, is his real name? I think his real name's Eddie. His
Eddie, yeah.
room, and we're kind of getting this shot panning around his room, and we learn so much about him just based on what he has on his wall. And then kind of seeing him looking at himself in the mirror. I love that. I love that shot a lot.
Yeah, that shot is great. I wrote that down too because like then you see like he's got this poster on the wall of Bruce Lee and he's doing all these Bruce Lee moves.
Yeah.
Stuff. Like you can tell, okay, this guy like, but he believes that he can be Bruce Lee, right? Like that's who he, even when he's doing like these bad porn movies, that's who he thinks he's becoming.
Right.
Is Bruce Lee.
In a way, he kind of did it, but then, you know, eventually to his own demise. Yeah,
exactly. And there's a lot of that too. There's a lot of self-inflicted downfalls or exiles, stuff like that that happens in these movies.
Right.
Yeah, I really like this film. It's just so fun to watch. And I especially love, because this is really also kind of like a disco film too.
Yeah.
And you know, it does a fun like take on the other side of disco because you know there's I think Saturday Night Fever, they kind of go a little bit into it, but they're in the disco culture. There's a lot of drugs, there's a lot of sex, there's a lot of craziness.
Right, and it's so interesting that he shows every side of it in the way that you're watching it, and you're like, damn, I kind of want to like hang out with these people. Like this looks kind of fun and hip, and like, but then it's like, Jesus, there's like a lot going on here that's really terrible and yeah, just kind of both sides of that in that culture. And I'm sure, I cannot think of it on the spot, but I'm sure there's a lot of commentary on society coming from this one as well.
Yeah, totally. I especially just think of like the Julianne Moore character, like how she's doing all this stuff, but she's trying to like, you know, she has this relationship with her son who got taken away from her because of the divorce, and sort of society's just kind of against her in a way,
right?
You know, and she's just like trying to find a way to like get back to being where she was, being good. And it's just like she's not a bad person, really. You know, she does drugs or whatever, she does porn, but that doesn't make her a bad person. But society has just like judged her,
right?
And she kind of carries that pain in some of the other scenes. I think there was a scene like with her and Roller Girl, and I think they were talking while doing drugs. Yeah. And she's like, "Yeah, I could be your mother. Like, I'd really love to be your mom." And it's just like, whoa.
I know that seems a lot, but really interesting. That I know it's bordering on comedic, but it's also really emotionally impactful because of that kind of surrogate relationship there as well, and found family, because Roller Girl needs that too. And then she's also talking about how Dirk Diggler has kind of become like her replacement for her son that she lost.
Yeah, she's like, oh, why did he leave? Why did he have to do that? And it's just like, yeah, she just was trying to find these people to fill. All of them are, in a way. They're all trying to find some person to fill in a void that they have. And everyone just kind of came together randomly at this time, and they're like, okay, you're going to be my new son. You're going to be my new daughter. You're going to be my new this, my new mom.
Yeah. Kind of like these people that society may have turned their back on in one way or another. And then also like sex work being undervalued in society, and women being undervalued in society. And yeah, it's a really interesting culmination of all these people that have all found a way to fill that hole.
So what did you think of the William H. Macy character in this film?
Oh, isn't that so interesting?
Yeah.
I know it's interesting to think about the meaning that we can derive from that, because it's basically like he fills his role on the crew making these movies, and then he literally has to watch his wife cheat on him in front of all these people publicly. It's shameful. No one cares that it's happening. No one hears him when he says that it's upsetting, and then he just kills them and then shoots himself. Like, I feel like we didn't get to spend so much time with his character that there's like much to say about that. But you know, I feel like everything that we could get from that is right there. You know, like maybe in the way that men's emotions aren't being valued either. and that he wasn't being paid attention to, and no one was really noticing that he was at that point.
Yeah, there's even a scene where, like, you know, they're at that kind of backyard party, pool party, and he sees his wife, and the guy comes up to him and is like, hey, you know, I think we need to use this other film stock. He's like, what do you, my wife is like,
Yeah.
there's a bunch of people around my wife having sex. Like, I can't think about that right now. It's like, well, dude, we got to shoot tomorrow. And they just totally ignore him. And then after his character leaves, the other guy goes to watch them having sex.
Yeah. Just a wild situation. And yeah, and it's weird because it's like, why wouldn't you just like get divorced or like not really care that your wife was doing that? But I feel like he just wasn't one of those guys who was in there in that you know, outright sexual way, and he just maybe didn't find his place in that environment.
Yeah.
And he couldn't take it.
Yeah, and I think it's also like the fact that he felt like he couldn't get out. You know, he felt like he couldn't just divorce her. I think it was probably more than just that. It's like the I guess probably the embarrassment and just like the fact that he's being subjected to this thing and no one cared, but it hurt him.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really interesting character.
Yeah,
kind of
that
crazy.
was a really interesting decision for him to have him act out like that.
Yeah, because it's kind of out of nowhere. I mean, that's a big point in the film where it's like, oh, hey, yeah, because they're at
the New Year's party, right?
It's a New Year's party. It's 1980, and everyone's like happy, and doing drugs, and then he just walks in, sees his wife, goes, and it's like all done in one take. He sees his wife, he comes back out, gets the gun, goes back in, shoots himself, and then, you know.
It does feel very Tarantino. And I think the drug scene feels very Tarantino as well.
The drug scene.
The Alfred Molina scene.
Yeah. For sure. All right, cool. So yeah, now let's talk a little bit about Magnolia. So this film, this is like the real mosaic. I mean, there's a ton of characters. We get different perspectives of all this stuff. It's also kind of like bookended by these kind of small stories about weird coincidences, which are very interesting because it kind of sets up the story that we're about to see. Basically, that this is another strange coincidence. And had you seen this for the first time recently?
No, I actually watched this for the first time a few years ago because, and this was before I was really familiar with Paul Thomas Anderson, but it just seemed like a really intriguing film to me, and I remember being like, whoa, this film is really long, like I hope it's good, and I was totally blown away by it. It's still one of my favorites from PTA, probably my top 3 or 4 from him. I just feel like it's so, like, even between, I kind of compared this and Boogie Nights because there are just like these epic explorations of like this larger group of characters, and I feel like this one's a little bit more of a downer for sure. Like, I feel like he was definitely experimenting with kind of that lonelier side of the human experience and how, you know, these people who are ending their lives with such regret and they're alone, and there are some hopeful notes about, you know, there is a place to put your love, and there are people that you will find and that you can always ask for forgiveness at the end of the day. Just such a like it's so crazy that he explored kind of every corner of that through these characters, and it's very solemn and it's very beautiful, and I really love this film a lot. It's crazy that he just cut to the core of like being human and how we're all connected and you know, life, and how like our experiences in life kind of dictate what we do, and that's just like being human.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good way to kind of summarize it, because that's really what it is. It's a bunch of people being human, and then through a confluence of different events, a lot of these things kind of, they meet one another in different ways. And then you get this religious kind of allegory thing where it rains frogs.
Right. That was, I'll never forget the moment where the frogs came down, and I was just like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, that's one of those.
Google literally right away. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's another. And I forget, there's another moment. Oh yeah, there's a musical interlude in this movie too, where they start singing.
Yeah, where they're all singing the same song. Right.
They're all singing the same song.
Right.
Yeah, so that's, plus this is like a 3-hour drama, so like there's a lot to chew on in this film. A lot.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, right. And I like when he kind of does those really idiosyncratic things. Like he keeps surprising us, and it's not like he's being like how M. Night Shyamalan is labeled the twist guy. Like it's like you never know what to expect, and these really, really interesting decisions that he makes that are interesting to kind of think about why he did that.
Yeah, totally. And I think, it would be remiss if we didn't talk about the Tom Cruise character, seduce, destroy technique. that whole character is kind of like, first off, it's so brilliant because it's not, because you can create that character and you can just kind of go haha, but there's a whole story to him, and it's all fueled by this kind of again, a lack of a father figure who abandoned him, and what that did to him. And so at the end of this line, you see a person who's running away from the pain that they've felt in their past. And so, basically like creates a persona to fake to the world, lies about his past, lies about his association with his father, because he doesn't want to confront it. And then finally, all these things happen that make him have to confront what happened and the pain and the hurt, which is so interesting.
So interesting. And then how it all comes together as his dad's dying and he's asking for forgiveness, and Tom Cruise gets there, and he's like crying, and he's like, I fucking hate you, but clearly like it's still there, like it's like he craves that love from his dad, and that's why it's so painful, and it came so late, but it definitely was like this emotional catharsis that happened. And then the way that Philip Seymour Hoffman's character is crying in the back, and really, really powerful moment with that. And also, I mean, not that I've seen every Tom Cruise movie, but one of his best performances of his career. I think that, PTA definitely can get really good performances out of these actors, whether it's Adam Sandler, I'd even say Mark Wahlberg and Boogie Nights, actors that you would not expect could give us something like this. Tom Cruise blew me away in this movie.
Yeah, totally. And the other thing too is like, there's so many different catharsis that are happening, and it's so well woven together, right? Because like now, when you talk about that, I'm just thinking about the Julianne Moore character, how she's like, was she talking to a lawyer? She's like, oh, I didn't love him before, I just married him for the money, but now I actually do love him, and he's dying. I don't want any of the money. And they're like, oh no, he can't do that because it didn't go to his son. He doesn't want to go to the son. And just like, again, how everything is so interrelated. And there's that great moment where like, Philip Seymour Hoffman's on the phone. He's like, oh, I got his son. Like he's gonna come over. I almost got him on the phone. She's like, no, don't, and hangs up the phone. And you're just like, no.
Yeah.
There's so many, and then there's the other. So there's like William H. Macy, who he was a former child, like, goes on these TV shows with Smartest Kid in the World kind of thing where they ask him trivia. But he's super broken person. Like that whole thing didn't do anything for him. He kind of, it seems like basically he was just like ponied out like a toy or a doll or something. And that kind of reflects on, there's the other, like basically a new version of him who's on this TV show, same TV show, I'm pretty sure. And he's going for a record. But basically the whole thing of his story is like, no one cares about him. Everyone ignores him. His dad ignores him. His dad doesn't care about him. He just cares about what he can do for him. And then he gets into this whole thing where he has to like use the bathroom, but no one will let him. Like, oh no, it's a short break. So don't go. So he doesn't go to the bathroom. So he pees himself on live television. And that's like the worst. Wow,
It's so terrible.
I cannot imagine. And so then that causes a spiral. And then there's I forget the actor's name. What's the guy's name? I have it somewhere. I forget. The guy who plays Philip Baker. So Philip Baker plays the guy, and he's in a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson films too. He was in Hard 8. He was in Boogie Nights, short, and he's in Magnolia. So he plays this guy who is the host of the show. He has another kind of dark past where basically he molested his daughter.
Yeah.
And that messed her up. And now she's on drugs and doing all this stuff.
Oh, can I interject there? Mm-hmm. Because I'm still not sure. Did you think that because when his wife finally confronts him about that, where she's like, I think I know exactly what your daughter means when she's saying that, is that he's like, I don't remember. I wasn't sure if it was kind of alluding to whether he had a drinking problem or if he's truly just not ready, if he's just not willing to like confront that. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Well, I can definitely see how that's something that someone would suppress and not want to think about.
Mm-hmm.
That's a rough one.
that one was really heavy, and like something that you were not expecting at all, but explains so much about the level to which his daughter is really struggling and
hates him.
And hates him, clearly. And then she's so afraid to have this connection with John C. Reilly, and for him to know that about her and see her for who she really is, which is another huge theme in this movie, is being vulnerable. And being so desperate for love, but also so scared of it at the same time. And with I think it's like Donnie the Quiz Kid, is that what his name was? He's also super messed up in an interesting way that like clearly he's led a rough life, and it's kind of that gifted child syndrome where it's like you're like this prodigal child when you're younger, and then eventually everyone catches up to you or you can't maintain that, and then it's like, where do you go? And then his parents like stole his winnings from him, and so in a way it's like, yes, I understand, but also clearly he is living in the past, and he is still kind of pitying himself for what happened when his parents took his money and stuff, and I think that makes his character really, really complex. And then, but also he's gay, which is like this whole other component that he's clearly struggling with, and it's like.
So he has this great line. Do you remember the line he has in this movie? That's really good.
That one about he doesn't know where to put it.
He says, "I really do have love to give. I just don't know where to put it." And it's like,
that's a really powerful line.
Yeah, because you can tell he's so confused, and he's like, "Yeah, I got braces because the guy I liked had braces, but he had no." It's just so like how people get wrapped up in like thinking about other people. You know what I'm saying? Like when you start to like compare yourself to other people, then you start to get in your own head and you start to destroy yourself. Because there's that whole thing in the bar where like there's the other guy who's talking to the bartender, and he's like upset. He's just mad at this guy, but he has no relationship to the bartender. Like the bartender doesn't know who he is, but he's like in his own head about it, and he's just But people do that all the time.
And I feel like it's when you're not really at peace with yourself and who you are. Like clearly he still had something to prove, like when he was trying to prove to everyone, oh, I was that kid on TV, like I'm so smart, I still know these things. Like he's clearly not a lot of self-love going on there, and I think he was seeking that out from other people and letting his self-worth rely on whether or not he was loved back. It's like a really, really tragic cycle.
And to like put a button on it, there's a John C. Reilly character who's like kind of the most pure-hearted person stumbling through here.
Right.
And he just gets into all these scenarios. He's just so kind of nice and likable.
Mm-hmm.
He has that fun interaction with that young kid who like raps to him.
Yeah.
And then, he meets the daughter, and she's doing drugs. And he comes in, and of course she's thinking about the drugs. He's thinking about, oh my gosh, she's so hot, I want to ask her out. That whole scene is so funny.
It's so awkward, but it's so funny. And you're like, does she like him back? Like, literally, what is going on right now? And then when she makes the coffee and it's like shitty coffee and he like dumps it in the sink really quick. That whole thing was so funny.
Yeah, that was great. And then they go on a date and they're talking, and she's, like you said, there's that hurt. She can't like, it's a problem for her to like go into a relationship. You know, she's been so scarred.
Right.
And so, you know, and they have that great moment where they're both like kind of vulnerable, and he's like, oh, I lost my gun today. You know, I was embarrassed. It was bad. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's a very kind of beautiful, and the movie ends with the two of them too, where, you know, like we only see her, but like it seems like he comes to her and he's like, you know, because he's always rehearsing these things he wants to say to people, but no one's there to listen to him. And he'd like been rehearsing this thing for her, and she's like kind of nodding there the whole time.
Yeah. The dinner scene with them is really, really beautiful, and how they kind of work together, because she's like so messed up and he is like this like straight narrow like moral compass of a person, but
he's so doughy-eyed.
Yeah, exactly. And so it works in that really weird way. And yeah, I think just like tragically beautiful would be my biggest descriptor for this movie and all of the characters in it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's such a unique film, and like basically after he did Boogie Nights, like he kind of got a blank check, and this is what he did.
Yeah, and it truly, I mean, one of the more unique films probably to come out of the 90s, and it clearly inspired a lot to come after it, and it's just so Paul Thomas Anderson. I know, I love just seeing him do what he wants, and whatever ends up coming out of him. And we didn't touch again on kind of this theme of coincidence, and I think the story that he tells at the beginning is so interesting and really messed up, but also kind of funny. With the kid who was like jumping off the building.
Yeah. Loaded the gun, because his parents were always fighting. Loaded the gun. The mom fires the gun. He jumps out the building. There's a net that would have caught him, but then she shoots the bullet at just the right time, so he dies, falling out of the window.
Catches him through the window. Yeah, so what do you think of like this theme of coincidence and how it kind of ties into all our characters?
That's a really good question, because there's and again in the Boogie Nights, there was that, remember, so like I forget the one character, he goes to a convenience store, someone holds up the store, and everyone dies. Basically something happens where everyone dies except for him, and he then gets the money he needs to start the store he wants. Which is it's like, whoa, such a weird thing. On some level, it's almost like kind of like serendipity. Like that was the Boogie Nights situation was a very serendipitous situation where it's like, okay, let's create this crazy situation to give the character what they want or need, or at least on a certain way we can talk about, I guess, fate in a way, fate and destiny. I guess that sort of dichotomy is fate the thing that we're cursed to have to do, or is it I was destined to do? Was he destined to start that store? And so he just needed to walk into that place and he was going to get the money no matter what. Or was it maybe fated that maybe that was the wrong path for him? Who knows? I think it's interesting because like you can always sort of interpret it as we don't have control in a way. And I think that's kind of what comes to my mind is like, how much control do we actually have about our actions, right?
Right. That's so interesting because I have not reviewed Magnolia on Letterboxd yet, but I have like a draft that I was working on. And basically I talk about how like me personally, like it's a big statement, but I don't really believe that we have free will, which I mean, what you were just saying about control and that, yes, we can make our own decisions, but we are all such, individually unique people. We have this unique set of experiences, and everything that we do is going to be informed by every single moment that's come before it that happened to us, for better or for worse. And so in that way, our experiences make up what we do. And when you have all these people in the world with that happening, sometimes like all these things perfectly align and something just happens, and there's like this network of moments and decisions that came before it, which reminds me a lot. Have you seen Riders of Justice?
Yes.
How that's
Yes, I
kind of like
have.
one of the main
Yes.
themes of the film, how like one event happens and there's so many millions of moments and decisions that come before it,
Yeah.
which I think is like really, really interesting. It's kind of like that's just it, there's nothing anyone can do about it. That's just kind of how it is. And sometimes it results in these really crazy things happening.
Yeah, so that kind of reminds me of like, so I'm pretty sure it's in the Watchmen graphic novel. Dr. Manhattan, who from a freak accident becomes basically a god, he says about himself, it's not that I can control the strings of what happens, it's that I can see the strings. So this thing that is a god, even he can't control the fate of what happens to people, what happens in the course of events. And yeah, I mean, so, you can definitely interpret a lot, especially like Magnolia, where it's just a bunch of people and we're seeing the result of the puppeteer strings of all of these different environmental factors in people's lives, what it does to them.
Right.
Is there any possible way that the Tom Cruise character cannot have some kind of tragic life because of what his dad did to him? And maybe his dad did that to him because of something that happened to him by his parents or his upbringing that made him need to be harsh so that he could,
Right.
Succeed. And because he was a rich guy. Maybe that's just how life is.
Yeah, no, exactly. And again, like it's so tragically beautiful, and it is that way for better or for worse. And that is interesting with the Watchmen thing, that he can't really control himself taking action, but he can see that he will do that, and that's really interesting.
He can see the chain of events. He can even see where he places himself in it, but he can't change it.
Right. Did you watch the Watchmen show?
Yeah, I did.
That was really powerful. Won't spoil it, but that was towards the end, the last couple episodes, that theme was really, really powerful.
Yeah, that was really powerful. There's a lot of stuff where we think about, I mean, Tenet kind of talks about this, where it's like we think of things in terms of cause and effect, but maybe they're not as linked as we think. Sometimes effect can create cause. And so even if you can see the end, you can't really change it because maybe that's just how time works. There's one timeline and there's one path for us. And any other knowledge is part of what is supposed to happen.
That's
so we can't escape it.
How it's all, in a way, it's all kind of happening at once. Huh. Yeah. Magnolia, powerful movie. This is making me want to go watch it again.
I know, right? Yeah. So let's talk about lastly just There Will Be Blood.
Right.
Probably like I'd go out there and say it's his most acclaimed film. I'd say. Pretty safe to say. This film is like very powerful. I remember when I first saw it. There's something so palpable about everything: the environment, the time period, the acting. I mean, the acting is like off the charts. I mean, if you had to like put, okay, what are some of the greatest scenes of all time in terms of acting? A couple of them are in this film for sure. That whole when he's being baptized. That's probably. I mean, that stuff is like wow. I mean, even the thing that comes to my mind is like when Paul Dano is like giving that sermon. There's like that one long take of him doing the sermon, and then you cut to Daniel Day-Lewis, and he's like, "Oh shit, I'm in with the charlatan." It's amazing.
Their dynamic in this film is like, oof.
It is so powerful because, again, it kind of speaks to this, like, this whole thing feels like an American allegory. It's like, well, the country, there was a frontier, and then the frontier was conquered by people like, the one character, like the capitalist side, like the people who wanted to like transform society into something, transform nothing into something that can be useful for us by any means necessary, like the most cutthroat way possible. And then there's like the religious side too. You take these two forces and you bash them together, and then you get America.
Right. I know there are such archetypes in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Just that theme of greed, how he is kind of, the embodiment of greed and capitalism. And I don't know why I'm like having a hard time coming up with stuff to say about this movie. I feel like it is just that, like, it's like such a powerful character study of him and their relationship to each other, and how you mentioned earlier him using his son kind of for profit. And I think the first time around, it took me a little bit to kind of fully appreciate the nuance of his relationship with his son, and how he kind of sent him away to school, and how you can tell he loves him, like kind of in one way or another, but on the other hand, he's also just a full-blown sociopath, and he can't really love anyone.
He can't.
And that's why no, go ahead.
I have a really fun hot take about this movie.
I
have a really fun hot take.
What is it?
This will probably be the first time I've publicly stated this.
Okay.
Well, I might have said it before, but anyway, we'll go for it. So, I think that you could categorize this as one of the greatest horror films of all time.
Whoa.
I think I would go on record as saying that you could categorize this as a horror film, and if you did, I'd say it's like easily top 5, easily.
I'm down with the take.
Yeah, and so the way I would justify that, there are a lot of scenes in this film that I think are legitimately very scary, like actually invoke fear. And even the film basically opens with, like, you see him in the hole, and then there's a jump scare where he falls to the ground. I mean, it's a pretty scary kind of opening. And then there's multiple times where we see, talking about this sort of theme of coincidence and fate. People are just kind of fated to die, or there's kind of moments where it's kind of a coin flip. There's a moment where Daniel is in the well, and there's another guy in the well, and this, I don't know, it's like a drill bit or something, falls through the well, kills the guy. I mean, that stuff is really scary. And that's the first time. There's a second time that happens, and the second one where it's a larger drill bit that falls on the guy's head. That's legitimately, honestly, one of the scariest things I've ever seen. Seriously, for me, like, I sometimes think about that image of the guy getting hit in the head, and it's like, ooh, I just imagine myself being stuck in there, like how scary it would be. Like, you look up and you see this drill bit thing swinging, and you're just like, am I gonna die? Really scary. He murders 2 people in this film, straight up murders. He murders
his brother.
He murders his brother. And in the end, he takes the bowling pin to the Paul Dano character, beats his head in.
That scene is terrifying. So terrifying. I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis is absolutely terrifying in this movie. He's like the devil. He is pure evil. And also just that so many scenes are kind of in this very isolated and desolate environment. I totally love this take with the horror aspect of it. I mean, and also, oh my gosh, the scene where he and Paul Dano have a confrontation. He's kind of like rubbing his face in the mud and beating him up. Hard to watch. Like, he is just relentless. He's hateful. He's vengeful. Yeah, and then also very scary, the conversation that he has with his quote unquote brother, where he basically is just like, I don't really like people.
Yeah.
Really,
I have a
scary.
competition in me.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I don't like to see others succeed. Yeah, I mean, that's who he is. That was him, like, showing himself to the world.
Yeah.
That is who he is.
Yeah, I know. The first time he kind of really disclosed his true nature to someone else. I
mean, which is another reason why I had to kill him.
Yeah, no, exactly. I know. Yeah, then he just does that, and then that guy from the woods, like, knew what he did, which was interesting. But yeah, and then it's been a while since I've Googled it, but this has taken me multiple Googles to wrap my head around the ending of this film, and how he's kind of just like, he kills Paul Dano and he goes, I'm finished. And then he's talking about how he's like the third revelation. Do you have thoughts on that?
I don't know if I do specifically. Yeah, because that whole thing is, that it's so interesting too. Yeah, their dynamic, because it's almost like he wants to supplant the Paul Dano character, like his religion. He wants to thrust himself upon him because he's always looking to conquest and conquer something.
Right.
And that ending when he gets him to say, you know, that he's a false prophet, he's finally conquered. That's like the last thing he needed to conquer.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah. And I guess I'm thinking, like, why does this character do what he does? Like, why does he want to keep acquiring, like, wealth and land and whatever? He just wants power in the way that, I guess, yeah, I think he just wants power, and he doesn't care for people. And really interesting, he kind of just thinks that people are stupid and pitiful, and he doesn't care for them, and he obviously ends up alone at the end of the day. But I mean, yeah, there's not much to say about someone who's a sociopath. Like, that's just how he is.
Yeah. He's singularly, I mean, that's like one of the ultimate questions of mankind is like, why are people so interested in greed? But there are some people that is what they're wired to do, is to acquire and acquire and acquire and acquire. It's really like almost like the conflict, you know, the fact that it's hard, the fact that, you know, there's those Standard Oil guys there and he just wants to beat them. Like, that's all he wants. That's why he built that whole pipeline. He just wanted to defeat them at any cost, even though that cost for him was kind of high because he had, you know, it's really funny how he ignores that one guy, you know, the guy you said who knew that he murdered the person. He ignores him because the guy basically, he was a religiously affiliated person. For him, it's not about money, it's about religion. And so he needed to convert for him to give what he wanted to him. And that was a huge cost for him because he gets embarrassed in front of all these people in that that baptism. And he never got over that until he killed Paul Dano.
That's right. I know. He's so spiteful because of that. But yeah, I guess he just wanted to beat everyone. He just wanted to beat everyone and prove that everyone was below him. And that, you know, yeah, just totally ruthless. And the fact that he was, and I think it's kind of like in this way that it's an allegory like for capitalism, and that he is the embodiment of that, kind of that in these instances where he could have died but someone else did, like because he's so ruthless and because he lacks, you know, empathy and care for other people, and he's only looking out for himself. He survived those things and ended up taking everything over. And I think that kind of speaks to the ruthlessness of capitalism as well, which is scary in and of itself.
Yeah, totally. The other thing I love this film feels a lot like a Western.
Right.
And it's a Western in a way, in a totally different way, because like, you know, the Western is all really about, oh, there's this frontier and, you know, basically the cowboy is this hero archetype and the cowboy needs to help civilization conquer this frontier that's totally, you know, uncivilized. But once that's happened, then they kind of, you know, it's like the ending of of The Searchers. Like he can't be a part of the civilization. He has to like kind of walk away. But until, you know, the frontier is conquered, he has to go out there and battle. And he kind of really fills that role. Like we see these massive wide vistas and they're out conquering it and creating all of these oil wells to drain the earth of the natural resources and really kind of like bleeding the earth out. There's a lot of imagery where we see like something gets spiked into the ground and it looks like blood. And it's like, that can't be, I guess, forgotten, is that this is like the story of us conquering this physical space. And, you know, at the end of the film, we don't see any wide shots. We don't see anything. He's in this house. He's isolated. He's secluded. He's away from it. And so he's succeeded. He's conquered. But what does that cost? Civilization, I guess.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. Huh.
Yeah. It's almost like he succeeded, but he took it. That expansion took us away from, you know, what was the frontier, nature. We lost nature and we gained. And for him, he goes crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and then it looks like, yeah, and then that whole thing with his son. And it clearly was so painful for his son. Again, father-son relationship. But and hopefully, you know, his son would go on to do something better. But yeah, definitely, I think Paul Thomas Anderson is trying to tell us that we're not going to be left with much if we act on greed and keep killing the planet and trying to expand to every single corner just because we crave so much excess at this point.
Yeah, exactly. The avarice, you know, the pure, just unbridled greed, the need for more.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's about all that we can. You know, we've talked about the 4 films we want to talk about. Were there any last thoughts that you wanted to have about him in general, or anything you thought we might have missed?
I don't think so. I just feel so lucky, honestly, that we get to kind of be witnessing him coming out with films. Licorice Pizza was my first film of his that I actually got to see in theaters, which was really exciting. And the fact that I am very into his filmography and I'm more into film now than ever is it's just a really exciting thing that he's gonna keep making films for years and years, and we're gonna get to keep watching him. And I think that he makes some of the most interesting and complex characters that, you know, we've seen put to the screen. And I could talk about him forever, but yeah, I think he's such an incredible filmmaker.
Yeah, and it's an exciting time, for sure. And you know, again, like you said, there's gonna be more. So can't wait to see what the next thing that he has to show us.
Yep.
So cool. All right, thanks a lot, Sydney.
Thank you, Dream.
Anything you want to plug? Anything coming up?
Working on my video for Spider-Man No Way Home right now. I don't know if I'll get around to like a best of the year video, but I definitely want to review The Witcher season 2. If anyone watches The Witcher, maybe The King's Man, but I've been hearing not so great things. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have seen it.
Okay.
I've seen it.
What'd you think?
So I think that they made some kind of interesting choices. There's one kind of plot line that I thought was like really interesting, and I actually kind of liked it. But there's some diminishing returns with this franchise, and like there's a lot of it where the magic of the first film is kind of gone, and it's
right.
You know, it's just not really the same. So it's a very like average film, I'd say.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I definitely think Matthew Vaughn has to reevaluate what he's doing with the franchise, especially because I heard that they're thinking of doing a 3rd installment for the original Kingsman series, finishing out Eggsy's story. So, yep, I've got some videos coming out soon. So if anyone wants to go over to my YouTube and stick around for that, they'll be coming.
Yes, subscribe. Some good stuff there. All right, thanks a lot. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye, guys.